Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we are focusing on what I think is really the moment of truth in advanced warfighting.
Absolutely.
It's that critical, demanding transition where a brilliant plan stops being just an academic exercise.
And it has to become a tangible, synchronized action that's being executed by, well, thousands of people.
It's an essential bridge.
It is, because the plan itself is only a hypothesis.
Mm-hmm.
The doctrine, recognizes that theory has to be pressure tested against the immense friction that's just inherent in large-scale combat.
So if planning is the art of the possible,
Then preparation and rehearsals are the highly disciplined, very practical activities designed specifically to make sure the possible actually happens.
So our mission today is a rigorous analysis of how brigade-level forces manage this transition, and we're focusing on preparation and rehearsals.
And to do that, we are diving deep into the foundation of professional operational practice.
Our core sources today include Army Doctrine Publication 5.0, which is titled The Operations Process.
A foundational text. And we're also pulling from Field Manual 6.0, Commander and Staff Organization and Operations. And we're looking specifically at Appendix C on rehearsals.
And you really can't talk about this without getting into risk.
Not at all. So that means we're using Army Techniques Publication 519, which focuses on risk management.
And finally, to sort of tie it all together, we're using the guidance from the Center for Army Lessons Learned Handbook 1918, the Commander and Staff Guide to Rehearsals.
These sources are the blueprint. They really show how professional forces make sure that every single element from, say, the forward observer to the logistics convoy moves with a synchronized purpose.
All to reduce uncertainty and maximize the chances of success.
Exactly. So let's start at the beginning of that transition, preparation.
Okay, let's unpack this concept of preparation. Army Doctrine Publication 5.0 defines it pretty clearly.
It does.
It says it's the activities that units and soldiers perform to actively improve their ability to execute an operation. It's not just waiting around.
No, it's consciously creating conditions for success. And that emphasis on creating conditions is just vital.
It's not just logistics then.
Not at all. And what's important to remember is that this phase is highly fluid. The doctrine, specifically in Army Doctrine Publication 5 more, it stresses that preparation doesn't wait for the operation order to be finalized.
It starts earlier.
Much earlier. It typically begins during the planning phase and continues on throughout execution for those units that haven't yet been committed to the fight.
So it's a continuous effort.
Directed by the commander, yes.
This sounds like a huge undertaking then. It must involve everything from checking equipment to actual movement.
It does.
So what are the major strategic goals? I think there are 5 main functions that these preparation activities are trying to achieve.
Right, and these 5 functions are critical because they address the 5 main vulnerabilities that, can lead to mission failure.
Okay, so the first one.
The first is improving situational understanding. You just can't fully grasp the terrain or the threat from a map alone. Preparation involves reconnaissance, observation, patrols, all to confirm or deny your intelligence assumptions.
And the second one feels directly related to mission command. It's developing a common understanding of the plan.
Yes. We talked about the plan being a hypothesis earlier.
Right.
Well, preparation ensures that understanding of the hypothesis permeates the entire force through things like back briefs and detailed instruction. It moves the plan beyond the staff office and into the minds of the combat leaders.
Exactly. Then the third is the tangible side of readiness. Training and becoming proficient on critical tasks.
This is often the most time-consuming part. If the plan requires something novel or complex, let's say a rapid breach of a new kind of obstacle, the preparation phase is where that proficiency has to be built or validated.
And the last 2 functions seem to deal with integration and logistics.
They do. Fourth is to properly task organize and integrate the force. When new units or specialized capabilities like engineer support or aviation get attached, preparation is that dedicated time to integrate their standard procedures and their communications.
And fifth, it ensures forces and resources are correctly positioned.
The logistics backbone. You have to pre-position the ammunition, the fuel, the medical assets, not just for the opening attack, but for the next phase of the operation too. You have to ensure sustainment doesn't become your limiting factor.
If these 5 functions are so critical, especially the training and organization parts, then time has to be the ultimate resource here.
It's the only resource you can't get more of.
Which brings us to the famous, and I think often challenging, 1/3, 2/3 rule. Why is this proportional guideline so essential to the doctrine?
It's really a doctrinal hammer, and it's designed to protect the subordinate commander. Army Doctrine Publication 5.0 mandates that the higher command should use no more than one-third of the available time before execution for its own planning.
Leaving the lion's share for everyone else.
Right, the remaining two-thirds is explicitly reserved for subordinates to do their own detailed planning and, more crucially, their preparation activities.
So why is this so frequently difficult to achieve in practice?
Because planning just takes time, especially in a complex, multi-domain environment. If the higher commander takes, say, 50% of the time,
Which happens.
it does, they are unilaterally forcing their subordinate units to severely compress those 5 essential preparation functions we just talked about.
So they're rushing the training, the integration.
They're rushing everything. And when subordinates are forced to rush these activities, they're not just being inconvenienced, they are inherently increasing what we call hazard-based risk.
Risk from fatigue, poor coordination.
Lack of proficiency, all of it, to potentially unacceptable levels. The rule exists because preparation is simply non-negotiable for success.
So the one-third, two-thirds rule isn't just a simple scheduling constraint. It's actually the commander establishing the minimum acceptable risk tolerance for the entire operation.
Precisely. And the commander prioritizes what preparation happens through specific guidance in the initial warning orders and then in the final operation order. They're telling their subordinates, focus your two-thirds time budget on these 3 tasks above all others.
Now let's talk about a critical paradox you mentioned earlier. The doctrine is very clear that the force is often at its most vulnerable when it is preparing.
Right.
Why is that?
It's a combination of visibility and, well, static posture. When you're preparing, the force is often concentrated in assembly areas or staging points.
Which creates a huge signature for the enemy.
A huge detectable signature for enemy reconnaissance. And paradoxically, your key leaders are often away from their main units, gathered for critical coordination meetings or rehearsals.
So your command and control is also concentrated.
Exactly. Supplies are being moved and organized. All this concentration and activity just makes the force a ripe target for long-range fires or targeted intelligence collection.
That concentration of vulnerability means security has to be paramount. What specific guidance does Army Doctrine Publication 5.0 give for security operations during this phase?
It mandates the aggressive integration of all the various tasks of the protection warfighting function. So you're talking about screen, guard, cover, area security, and local security.
Every element has a role.
Every single element must understand its role in mitigating both external and internal threats. Even the most forward maneuver company needs to maintain local security to prevent small enemy recon teams from getting into their area. Security is not an afterthought, it's a preparatory task.
And central to all of this is operations security, or OPSE. How does that specifically relate to preparation?
Well, OPSC is the intentional effort to deny the enemy critical information about our intentions and capabilities. Commanders have to direct meticulous measures to conceal friendly actions.
So hiding rehearsals, disguising movement.
All of it. Hiding the scale of rehearsals, disguising friendly movements, and masking the physical concentration of maneuver forces or sustainment supplies. If the enemy learns the time and place of our main efforts concentration, they can preempt the whole plan with deep fires, or, worse, reposition their reserves.
A high-risk preparation means a high chance of mission compromise.
Without a doubt.
To really drive this home, this idea of preparation as condition setting, let's look at a historical anecdote the doctrine itself uses.
A powerful one.
The Rangers preparing for the seizure of Pointe du Hoc during the D-Day invasion.
This story is preparation defined. Lieutenant Colonel James E. Rudder's task was to seize a coastal battery that the Germans had deemed impregnable because of its 100-foot sheer cliff approach.
So the mission's success hinged entirely on developing a capability that just didn't really exist at the time.
It didn't. Rapid, large-scale cliff assault wasn't a standard skill. They weren't just practicing something they already knew.
They had to invent the technique under operational pressure.
Exactly. Their preparation wasn't reading a manual. It was intense trial and error. They worked with British commandos for some initial instruction, but the bulk of the effort was their own development and testing.
So what did they come up with?
They experimented until they settled on a specialized system involving rocket-fired rappelling ropes that were equipped with grappling hooks.
That's incredible innovation.
It is. And they even mounted machine guns on extension ladders that were attached to landing craft.
To provide suppressive fire from below.
Yes, against the German defenders at the top of the cliff. Just an astonishing level of detailed engineering and, well, ingenuity.
And the training regimen was, I imagine, relentless.
It had to be. In the weeks leading up to the invasion, the Rangers repeatedly practiced, refined, and tested these skills not just once, but multiple times on various similar cliffs along the English coast.
So they achieved a high level of proficiency.
So high that when they landed on June 6th, despite navigational errors and brutal fire, their prepared capability allowed them to execute the task. They seized the position, and they denied the Germans those critical 155mm guns.
That's the proof that preparation works.
It makes these seemingly impossible possible.
The Rangers' preparation culminated in a highly complex critical task. That leads us directly into our next subject,
The rehearsal.
the next logical step.
Army Doctrine Publication 5.0 defines a rehearsal as the formal session where the commander and staff, or the unit, practices expected actions to improve performance during execution.
So if preparation sets the physical and cognitive conditions, the rehearsal is the ultimate quality control check. It validates the plan's operational flow.
There's a historical way to this, isn't there?
There is. You can see it in the words of Field Marshal Bernard Law Montgomery. He emphasized the necessity of assembling all commanders before a battle, down to the lieutenant colonel level, to explain the problem, the intent, and the exact plan.
And his point wasn't about dictating tasks. No, it was about forging a universal, shared mental model of the fight.
That shared mental model is key. If everyone has read the operation order, why is physically walking through the process rehearsing still deemed so critical?
Because reading is passive. Rehearsal is active validation. Field Manual 6.0 is really precise on this distinction.
How so?
It says an effective rehearsal is emphatically not a commander's briefing to subordinates. If it devolves into a briefing, it fails. Its singular purpose is validating synchronization.
So confirming the precise what, when, and where of tasks.
Exactly. Tasks that multiple subordinate units have to perform either simultaneously or sequentially.
And since the rehearsal is stress testing the plan, it often leads to refinements in the final operation order.
It does, but that order ultimately remains the commander's instrument. The insights gained refine the timing and coordination measures within the order. But the real strategic output of the rehearsal, it goes beyond the paper plan.
It's about that shared understanding.
It is. It ensures all personnel understand the commander's intent, the overarching scheme of operations, and the desired end state. And that level of holistic understanding is essential for enabling mission command.
Okay, let's focus on that. Mission command. Why does a detailed rehearsal enable decentralized execution in the face of chaos?
Because of the inevitable friction. In high-tempo, large-scale combat, communications fail, units get lost, the enemy never cooperates.
The plan never survives first contact.
Right. And as Field Manual 6.0 notes, the rehearsal prepares subordinates to assume the role of their supervisor if the worst happens. But more commonly, it just prepares them to quickly adapt to unforeseen events without needing centralized permission.
So if a subordinate knows the commander's intent,
The higher purpose.
they can make rapid, localized decisions that maintain momentum toward the overall objective.
A well-rehearsed force is an adaptable force. Simple as that.
To achieve that adaptability, you need standardization, especially now with the complexity of coalition or joint operations.
Absolutely.
What role do standard operating procedures play in making rehearsals efficient?
They are the foundation of efficiency. Field Manual 6.0 points out the significant friction points that can arise in multinational operations. Incompatible communication systems, different doctrinal approaches, language barriers.
So clear, standardized rehearsal procedures are critical.
They drastically increase efficiency by dictating how information is exchanged, how markers are used, and who speaks when. Without established procedures, the rehearsal itself just becomes another source of chaos.
And since time is always limited, leaders can't rehearse everything, so how do they prioritize what gets rehearsed?
They have to focus their efforts ruthlessly on the most complex or high-risk actions. Leaders prioritize those battle, drills, and operational tasks that they anticipate occurring during the mission.
So things like link-up procedures or reacting to a complex obstacle.
Exactly. Or synchronizing the transition from movement to an assault. It's all about focusing resources where the risk of confusion or error is highest.
Let's get into the specifics of how leaders manage this prioritization. They do it by choosing the right type of rehearsal, the what, and the right execution method, the how.
Right. And there are 4 main types of rehearsals defined in Field Manual 6.0.
We can probably organize them by scope.
That's a good way to look at it. The most comprehensive is the full dress rehearsal. This involves every participating soldier, vehicle, and system moving across the actual terrain, ideally in sequence.
Okay. What's the major trade-off for that level of detail?
Well, while it gives you the absolute most detailed synchronization check, you can observe physical timing, detect issues like traffic jams or hidden logistical problems.
Mhm.
It is astronomically resource intensive.
It requires huge amounts of space and support.
And critically, it is the hardest type to secure. The operations security risk is extremely high. You're basically parading your entire force before the battle.
So it's rare outside of training environments.
Very rare.
Moving down that complexity scale, we get to the reduced force rehearsal.
This one strikes a much better balance. It involves only the critical participants, so platoon, company, or team commanders, often moving in their command vehicles or even dismounted,
So it's far less resource intensive.
and much easier to secure. The goal is still synchronization, but you're relying heavily on the integrity of those leaders to disseminate the fine-grained knowledge back to their subordinates before the operation.
Next, we have the support rehearsal, which focuses narrowly on a specific function.
This is used when a specific warfighting function needs really tight synchronization. You might run a fires rehearsal, for example, dedicated solely to ensuring artillery, mortars, and close air support are all coordinated to hit specific targets at precise times.
Or a protection rehearsal.
Right, ensuring air defense and chemical defense assets transition properly as maneuver forces cross phase lines. It just isolates the complexity.
And then there's one that most people are probably familiar with, the key leader rehearsal.
This is the workhorse. It's the most common and the most versatile. It involves only key leaders, commanders, staff, attached unit leaders, moving across a terrain model, or sometimes the actual operational area if it's secured,
And the focus is exclusively on synchronization of complex tasks.
like a passage of lines or crossing a major river. It offers a great balance of detail, speed, and security.
Okay, so shifting to how the methods used to execute these rehearsals. The most intuitive is probably the terrain model rehearsal.
Essential for visualization. As the field manual notes, a terrain model can be small, using miniature markers, or it can be so large that participants can physically walk on it, which really aids spatial understanding.
And there's a key recommendation for where to place it.
There is. The doctrine recommends locating it so it overlooks the actual operational area and orienting it to the terrain. This immediately links the abstract plan to the physical reality.
If you can't build a physical model, you might opt for the sketch map rehearsal.
A fast, flexible alternative. You use a drawn map, or even just a sketch on a whiteboard, to help leaders visualize the commander's intent and concept of operations when time or security limits you.
It requires more abstract thinking, though.
A higher level of abstract thinking from the participants than a physical terrain model, for sure.
And the most abstract method is the map rehearsal.
You'd use this when time is extremely short or the operational area is just too vast, say a whole division-level movement covering hundreds of square kilometers. It relies entirely on map graphics.
It requires leaders to have highly developed map reading and visualization skills.
It does. It tests mental synchronization, but gives you the least intuitive feel for the ground itself.
Finally, we have the modern challenge and opportunity, the network rehearsal.
This method uses your command and control information systems and networks, often involving simulations or shared digital maps. It's incredibly efficient for multi-shell-on coordination.
It lets dispersed units synchronize without moving.
Right. Even joint or multinational partners across continents can synchronize simultaneously. It validates the technical systems and the plan at the same time.
But the big critique we always hear about network rehearsals is the immense operations security risk.
It's a classic trade-off. Field Manual 6LO clearly warns that the high volume of electronic transmissions required for a network rehearsal can be monitored, collected, and exploited by the enemy.
You're basically broadcasting your intent and timeline digitally.
You are. The doctrine suggests using separate, secure frequencies or wire systems, but if you rely only on wires, you defeat the purpose of testing the network systems themselves.
So the commander has to make a conscious risk decision.
Exactly. Is the benefit of validating the technical systems worth the high OPSEC risk of that increased electronic signature?
We've established that this whole process, from preparation to rehearsal, is about reducing uncertainty and friction.
It is.
But this entire process is integrated with a continuous activity that dictates how much uncertainty we can actually bear. Risk management.
And risk management is not a standalone function. It's an integrating process that has to be continuous. Army Techniques Publication 519 really emphasizes its integration throughout planning, preparation, execution, and assessment.
The goal isn't to eliminate risk.
No, the goal is to enhance situational understanding and ensure that when the commander makes a decision, they accept the risk consciously and deliberately. You manage risk, you don't eliminate it.
So the process starts with identifying what can actually go wrong. You have to define the hazard.
Precisely. A hazard is defined as any condition with the potential to cause injury, death, illness, or mission loss. And the doctrine helps leaders classify these dangers into two distinct types, which is really essential for developing effective controls.
Let's use that doctoral field artillery scenario to illustrate the difference between these two risk categories.
Good idea. So first, you have threat-based risks. These stem directly from the active, hostile intent of the adversary.
So things like enemy obstacles on our route.
Or sophisticated enemy counter-battery capabilities that target our firing positions. Or electronic warfare systems trying to jam our command and control network. They are external dangers.
And then there are hazard-based risks. These often come from internal factors or the environment itself.
Right. These are your internal vulnerabilities, often linked to the preparation phase being rushed.
So things like inexperienced personnel trying a complex task they haven't rehearsed enough.
Exactly. Or soldier fatigue from a lack of administrative controls, or environmental factors like severe weather or dust that could cause equipment malfunctions.
And leaders have to identify both types.
Yes, because a threat-based risk usually requires a maneuver solution, while a hazard-based risk requires a preparatory solution.
Once hazards are identified, how do leaders actually quantify the risk? This is where the systematic approach of the risk management matrix comes in.
This is the science of the process. Risk is quantified by combining two axes. First is probability, the likelihood an event will occur.
And that's assessed using categories like frequent, likely, occasional.
Seldom or unlikely. And the second axis is severity, the expected consequence. That's ranked as catastrophic, which could be mission failure or death, critical, moderate, or negligible.
And the combination of those two factors determines the overall risk level.
Yes. For example, if you have a hazard that is likely to occur and its outcome is catastrophic, that immediately generates an extremely high risk level. This quantitative approach prevents leaders from relying purely on gut feeling.
It standardizes the conversation about risk.
Across the entire force, yes.
Once that risk is assessed, we move into the crucial step of mitigation step 4 of risk management, which, as we said, is primarily executed during preparation. This is where controls are implemented.
This is the action step. You apply controls to reduce that initial risk down to an acceptable residual level. And the doctrine organizes these controls into 3 functional categories.
Okay, let's start with educational controls.
Educational controls focus on knowledge and awareness. So this includes refresher training, specialized briefings, and developing new battle drills. A good example in preparation would be conducting refresher training on threat vehicle identification.
Or updating protocols for cyber hygiene.
Exactly. Making sure personnel are aware of the enemy's latest intelligence collection techniques.
Next are the physical controls.
These are actual physical safeguards. They include things like installing protective barriers, placing warning signs to delineate hazardous areas, or, maybe most commonly in the field, assigning dedicated oversight personnel.
Like ground guides for vehicle movement.
Or safety officers observing complex handling procedures for explosives. They are physically present to mitigate the hazard.
And the final category, which aims for the highest level of mitigation, hazard elimination controls.
These are positive, proactive actions designed to significantly reduce or totally eliminate the hazard. The doctrine even offers a preference hierarchy.
What's that?
First, you try engineering solutions, like redesigning a process or using specialized equipment. Second, you use administrative measures, which are rules or procedures.
Like mandatory crew rotation to combat fatigue.
Or establishing strict time limits for certain tasks.
Yeah.
And finally, the control of last resort is always personal protective equipment.
After all these controls are applied during preparation, the staff reassesses the risk. They calculate the residual level of risk.
And that calculation leads directly to the commander's ultimate decision.
The risk decision.
The formal determination by the commander to accept or reject the risk associated with the plan. And crucially, Army Techniques Publication 519 states that the residual risk must be equal to or below the commander's pre-established risk tolerance.
And if it's still too high?
The commander has 2 options. Accept the risk anyway, which is a monumental decision that requires justification to higher command, or
Modify the plan and implement new controls.
Right.
And to ensure transparency and accountability, this whole deliberate process is formalized.
Yes, documentation is required. The GD Form 2977 is the Army standard for deliberate risk assessment. It's a living document that captures all 5 steps:
Hazard identification, assessment, control development.
implementation, and supervision. It ensures every leader understands the nature of the risks they face and the specific controls that were applied during preparation to manage them.
We've covered the condition setting of preparation and the continuous management of risk. Now we reach the apex, the execution of the rehearsal itself.
Which is a highly formalized event.
Right, with defined roles designed to stress test the plan against the commander's intent and the likely enemy course of action.
And that structure is everything here. Field Manual 6.0 clearly delineates the specific responsibilities to ensure the rehearsal stays focused and productive.
And avoids becoming just an aimless discussion.
Exactly.
So let's start at the top, the commander.
The commander commands the rehearsal, just as they would the operation. They maintain focus, keep the intensity high, and most importantly, they are the one who validates the synchronization.
They're looking for holes in the timing and sequence.
Right, ensuring the plan remains aligned with their intent.
The person running the clock and orchestrating the event is usually the chief of staff or the executive officer, acting as the rehearsal director.
The rehearsal director is the scriptwriter, narrator, and timekeeper, all rolled into one. They ensure all time constraints are strictly met, and they cue the commander at predetermined moments when a decision is needed.
And their script is critical.
Yes, their script is the execution matrix and the decision support template. They're the engine that turns the static plan dynamic.
Let's pause there because those technical tools are key. What exactly are the execution matrix and the decision support template? How do they function as the rehearsal script?
Okay, so the execution matrix is a precise, time-phased spreadsheet. It tracks every unit's critical task, its location, and key resource flow against a specific time objective.
So director follows this moment by moment during the rehearsal.
To ensure units are physically, logistically, and spatially synchronized.
And the decision support template, that seems to be the tool that introduces the critical friction.
It is the absolute foundation of responsiveness. The Decision Support Template, or DST, is a graphical overlay that pinpoints exactly where the commander expects enemy branches to occur.
It identifies the corresponding decision points where action must be taken.
And it pre-plans the required friendly assets like reserve forces or deep fires needed to respond to that enemy action. The rehearsal director uses the DST to stop the action and force the commander to practice making those pre-planned real-time decisions.
That brings us to the staff officers who inject the reality of the fight. The G2 or S2, the intelligence officer.
The G2's role is absolutely essential. They portray the enemy forces and the operational environment based on the most likely enemy course of action, which was determined during the military decision-making process.
They inject friction by stressing the friendly system with realistic enemy reactions.
Right, often focusing on the timing and location of an enemy reserve commitment or a counterattack.
And the G3 or S3, the operations officer.
The operations officer portrays the friendly scheme of maneuver. They track friendly unit movement, ensuring that subordinate unit actions strictly comply with the commander's intent, especially regarding boundaries, routes, and established control measures.
They're the quality control for the friendly side.
In a sense, yes.
With the rules defined, let's walk through the 4 structured steps of rehearsal execution, drawing from Field Manual 6.0. Step 1 is deploy enemy forces.
This sets the stage. The G2 briefs the current enemy situation and operational environment. They physically place markers on a map, terrain model, or digital system representing all enemy forces.
Before the rehearsal even starts.
Yes. And then they brief the agreed-upon most likely enemy course of action, which will serve as the stress engine for the whole drill.
Once the threat is established, step 2, deploy friendly forces.
The G3 briefs the friendly maneuver unit dispositions. Subordinate commanders and participants place markers for their units and are required to state their task, purpose, task organization, and strength.
And it's not just maneuver units.
No, sustainment and protection units brief their starting positions and plans as well. And the rehearsal director often uses this moment to restate the commander's intent, just to lock in that universal understanding before the chaos begins.
Step 3 is where the plan actually begins to move. Initiate action.
The director triggers the process by stating the first event on the execution matrix. The G2 then begins moving the enemy markers according to the situation template, stressing initial contact, the timing of fire support, and the likely commitment of reserves,
The goal is to stress the timing of every critical junction.
and force the participants to interact and synchronize.
And this stress continues until they hit the final crucial step, reach decision points.
This is the moment of truth for the plan itself. When the rehearsal director determines that a specific enemy action or friendly reaction is complete, or a critical variance has occurred, the action halts.
And the commander assesses the situation.
To determine if a decision point has been reached. And these points come directly from the decision support template. The rehearsal validates whether the pre-planned friendly branches are triggered correctly, at the right time, and with the necessary resources.
We've taken a really comprehensive look today at that bridge between planning and execution.
We have.
Preparation is the vital process of condition setting, enforcing that 1/3, 2/3 rule, building proficiency on critical tasks, and applying stringent controls to manage risk.
And we established that rehearsals are the essential validation mechanism. They're formal, structured events that use the decision support template and the execution matrix to force synchronization,
Ensuring that every key leader not only knows their task, but fully grasps the commander's intent.
which empowers them to act decisively when the plan inevitably encounters friction.
We also saw how risk management is that continuous thread woven through every step, forcing commanders to define and quantify hazards, both threat-based and hazard-based.
And apply concrete controls during preparation before making that final, formal decision to accept the residual level of risk, which is documented on forms like the DD Form 2977.
Ultimately, this entire cycle is designed to enable decentralized execution.
It is. The forces that win in advanced warfighting are those whose leaders can outthink and execute tasks more quickly than the opponent. Thorough preparation and rehearsed synchronization provide the common operating picture necessary for subordinates to quickly adapt.
All within the commander's intent, which is the definition of effective mission command.
Exactly.
That level of synchronization is only getting harder in the modern environment. So here's our final thought for you to consider.
A real modern problem.
Right. In the multi-domain operational environment, you have all these critical assets: cyberspace, electromagnetic activities teams, long-range precision fires, space-based intelligence, that just can't physically be present on a terrain model during a key leader rehearsal.
They're like ghosts in the machine.
So how would you design a method to integrate those non-physical capabilities into a synchronization rehearsal? How would you ensure their timing is validated and a shared understanding is achieved without triggering the extreme operations security risk of a live network rehearsal?
It's a huge challenge. It requires applying these underlying principles, synchronization, visualization, risk management, to entirely new dimensions.
A challenge of our time.
It is.
That's all for this deep dive. We hope this has given you a clearer, more analytical understanding of the rigorous requirements that bridge theory and successful practice on the modern battlefield.